From the Arizona Daily Star and Tucson.com, this is the Wildcast.
You're listening to another episode of the Wildcast podcast. Justin Spears and Micah Lev coming at you. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the Wildcast podcast, located wherever you get your podcast. Also available on the Wildcaster app, which is where you'll find all of our Arizona football coverage. And per usual, that's all we're talking about for the next however minutes we're doing this podcast.
Wait, are you sure you don't want to break down Arizona men's basketball's non-conference schedule, which just officially came across the wire, Justin?
Added FAU officially?
Yeah, I mean, it's a loaded slate. Open with Morgan State, but Duke is on there, right? Michigan State is on there. Wisconsin, Purdue, Alabama, Florida Atlantic, all in a row.
Yeah.
Holy cow. I mean, Arizona, win or lose, they're going to have a really impressive resume when it comes tournament time this year. We can talk about basketball at a later date, but I have also heard from, inside the building that they really like the team this year a lot. So, hey, something to look forward to.
Well, and also, I think this is an appetizer for the Big 12 next year, because get ready, Arizona fans. The days of winning 50 consecutive home games, I think it's safe to say those are long gone, because the level of competition that the Big 12 has in comparison to the Pac-12, you're no longer getting the weekend trip to the Washington schools where you're going to win by 15 to 20 points. You're going to be going to Fog Allen Fieldhouse, and they're going to be coming to your house and going to be putting up a lot of competitive battles.
In football, is there a clear power in the new Big 12? I mean, is it Utah? Possibly?
Yeah.
I mean, is it Colorado? I mean, if I were Brett Yormark, I would be like, hey, how can we make sure that Deion Sanders stays at Colorado for a long time?
Yeah.
Because he's bringing so much attention to college football. And starting next year, that attention is going to be in the Big 12. Where Arizona is headed right now. But it seems like Oklahoma State just lost at home to South Alabama. They're struggling. Kansas State, which was ranked, lost to Missouri on that 61-yard field goal at the buzzer, and immediately followed by the fans storming the field, which was very cool to see. Kansas is doing really well. It's not a program traditionally that's been great at football. But there's no clear cut, with Texas and Oklahoma leaving, there's kind of a void there and an opportunity. And it seems like at least three of the four corner schools are in position to maybe fill that void. ASU they're in year zero right now. Let's face it. They are the 2021 Wildcats reincarnate. So many injuries, so many issues. It's hard to find obvious wins on their schedule the rest of the way. So that we'll see what kind of shape they're in by the time we get to the Territorial Cup. But we're a long way off from that, aren't we, Justin?
Well, think about that. You bring up the fact that ASU is the 2021 Wildcats. Well, think about the 2023 Wildcats and how much progress these guys have made over the last couple of years. Honestly, Lev, I think that there's a lot to take away from the first three games, and we just saw Arizona beat UTEP 31-10. Jetfish said it was the best team win or all-around win that he's been a part of at Arizona. I'm not so sure because, they beat UCLA on the road last year. A lot of good things happened in that game on both sides of the ball for the Wildcats, beating ASU. But then again, Jaden Delora in that game against ASU had a turnover. Jaden Delora on Saturday night did not have a turnover, had his most efficient game as a Wildcat, running the ball. We're talking about 244 yards on the ground. Passing 300 yards through the air, 224 yards after catch. So everyone on offense looked great. And then on defense, you got Jacob Manu and Justin Flo. Now they're leading the Pac-12 in tackles. How about that? I was kind of surprised when I looked at that. Whoa, I need to refresh that to make sure it's not after two games. But after three games, those two lead the way in tackles.
And why is that? I think it's because the defense is working the way they want it to work.
Yeah.
The guys up front are having such a big impact. It's freeing those guys to make all the plays. I think you mentioned this somewhere, but Bill Norton, you don't see it in the stats, but you see the impact elsewhere. He's taking up blockers. He's being a disruptive force. He's drawing holding penalties. He's derailing plays by just getting into the backfield. And the linebackers are the ones who kind of get the glory, right? They clean up the mess that the linemen are creating. But, it's proof of concept so far, right? I mean, you can do this in a relatively short period of time. The first off season, build up the offense. Second off season, build up the defense. Now, hey, heading into Pac-12 play, they look like a pretty complete team. Now, all that being said, after this week, when they should beat Stanford on the road, it is an absolute murderer's row coming up. I mean, 7 ranked teams in a row, starting with Washington and USC, which are both in the top 10. I put Washington number 3 in my AP top 25 this week, and upon further reflection, I think I should have put them up to number 2. I mean, there was no contest at Michigan State. Now, I know Michigan State is in a weird state, no pun intended, with the whole situation with their head coach and all the off-field issues there. However, it's still a Big Ten team that's been pretty good on the road. Like, they're playing on grass. So is grass going to slow Washington down? No. I mean, they obliterated them. Like, if they had tried hard and played the whole game, I mean, I feel like Michael Penix could have thrown for 700 yards in that game. And that's Arizona's home opener coming up in 2 weeks. 7 p.m. kickoff, which, hey, you know what? I tweeted this. It's better than 8.
Yep. That 1 hour really makes a difference, man.
It really does.
Especially, it makes a difference when you put your head on that pillow at night. When it's all
the next morning at 4 a.m.
Yeah.
I know. I come into bed. My wife's like, "It's 4 o'clock." I'm like, "What do you want me to do?"
8 o'clock game.
It's an 8 o'clock game. That's the way it goes.
Washington, best passing offense in college football right now, putting up 493.3 a game.
Unreal.
That's video game numbers.
And second best? I mean, probably USC, right? I mean, they're averaging 55 points a game. And Caleb Williams is absurdly good.
Colorado, Washington State are among the top.
Oh, they're up there too. Yeah, no, I believe it.
Crazy.
Yeah, I believe it.
So if you look at the best offenses in the Pac-12 or in the college football, and it's all in the Pac-12.
Okay, this is a great segue into, yes, Arizona put up 544 yards in that game, but they only scored 31 points. It's kind of weird, right?
Yeah.
You put up that many yards, you have that good balance, you have averaging, 8.5 yards a play. Why are they only scoring 31 points? We're going to ask Jed Fish about that when we meet with him later today. We're recording this a little past noon on Monday. But I looked up, I was trying to figure out what is going on here. Now, we know the turnovers happened against Mississippi State, right? So that's gonna derail an offense.
And also, real quick, we were talking about moral victories and hey, they went in SEC country and
I know where you're going with this.
Bulldogs.
I know where you're going with this.
Mississippi State got housed at home by LSU.
Sure did.
It's a 41-14 was the final score.
That was
unreal.
Yeah, that was the lock of the week right there. That point spread was only 9.5.
Anyways,
so I looked at explosive plays on CFBstats.com. They break it down by 10 yards plus, 20 yards plus, 30 yard plus. Okay, so they're a little bit off pace in explosive plays so far this season. They're on pace for 204 plays of 10-plus yards. Last year, they had 221. They're on pace for 72 plays of 20-plus yards. Last year, they had 84. They're on pace for more plays of 30-plus yards, 36 versus 33 last year. But their average per play is higher by almost a full yard.
Wow.
7.7 currently versus 6.8 last year. So, I don't know. Maybe it's fewer possessions. But then it's these other teams are scoring in the 40s and 50s.
Yeah.
With the same clock rules. So, I don't know. I'll be interested to see what Jed says about it. You feel like the way they're moving the ball, they should be scoring more points. Haven't been a ton of red zone, malfunctions, settling for field goals. Not a lot of that.
Well, and I also, with the defense being a lot better, I feel like you're getting the ball more. The defense isn't on the field as long because now they're getting off the field. Their third down conversions against UTEP and against Mississippi State are unreal. I mean, they're really good as a third down team. So
on defense,
on defense,
yeah.
So
Feeds into it even more. Why aren't they scoring more points?
I don't get it. I really don't.
It's peculiar, and it doesn't mean that they're. I mean, they are playing well. Like I said, they're averaging 7.7 yards a play.
Yeah.
That's really good. They're moving the ball. One other thing, and I think you pointed this out. I think I did as well. But the average depth of target against UTEP was only 4.4 yards, which it's the lowest I can remember under Jaden Delora. I haven't looked up every single game that he's played, and his ADOT this season is way lower than it's been. I think that's partially a product of he's taking checkdowns, to throw into the running backs. They had a lot of designed bubble screens in that game because Jed said they wanted to really tax the Miners like sideline to sideline, and they executed those plays really well. So I wonder, maybe it's just a little different style. Like they're just kind of, as they say, matriculating the ball down the field as opposed to, throwing it over the top, like maybe they did a little bit more last year.
Also, blocking on the perimeter, I think, is a lot better this season. I mean, blocking up front is really good on the offensive line, but also T-Mac, Kean Burnett, Tanner McLaughlin, I think these guys all have a very just more prominent, just better blocking role than they did last year.
Yeah, I remember when they were turning over the wide receiver core, and Kevin Cummings, he would talk about, like, we want more toughness, like, all due respect to Tavian Cunningham, who is a good kid and a productive player here, but he was really, small. He was undersized.
Oh, yeah.
And you look at the guys they have now, Cowling's probably the smallest of the bunch. Montana, Lamonius Craig's, 6'2", 200 plus.
Yeah.
And he's super physical. T-Mac is becoming more physical. A.J. Jones is a big guy. And what I really liked about a lot of those plays, they threw him to the left side, and here comes Jordan Morgan pulling out and running downhill. If you're a defensive back and you see 77 coming toward you at full speed, that's not a good way to spend a Saturday.
No.
So they're really taking advantage of his athleticism and the improvement of those players on the perimeter and making hay. And those plays. It used to frustrate me so much watching them try these bubble screens, and they just weren't working. They just get blown up because they weren't blocking well. Yeah. And now they are.
Well, in 2021, it felt like that was all they did was run those, like, hey, Stanley Berryhill, catch this and do whatever you do. They didn't have much of an offense in that season. Now you're kind of seeing the mind of Jed Fish.
Did really Stanley score one touchdown that season? Am I remembering this correctly? And I think I'm going to look it up while we're talking, but I know, like, he had that one touchdown against, I think it was San Diego State, on one of those plays, and it was like all yak.
Yeah.
Like the entire play was yak. All him, Mm-hmm. They were very limited that season in a lot of ways, as we know. And however frustrated people get with the offense when Jaden Delora is freelancing or freestyling or whatever, it's still way better than it was then. They are able to move the ball down the field. They have a lot more stability. The offensive line, I think, is significantly better.
Yes. Than
it was.
And it's only going to get better once Polito gets back.
Yeah, Stan had 83 catches that year and only one touchdown. So that should tell you right there. Like, guy who was in the NFL for a stretch, really productive. They couldn't spring him. They couldn't get him the ball.
And every time they got inside the red zone, they
not good.
Kind of pee themselves. So, okay, we have a bunch of questions regarding Arizona football. Lev's got some on Twitter. I got some over the weekend. Starting off with AZ Cat John. AZ Cat John's a regular on the the
very
Wildcast
very good. He's one of the good ones for sure.
What is the fascination with gadget plays in a game you are clearly controlling? Is he talking
I know what he's talking about.
The throwback?
Yep. He's done that 2 times, right? He did kind of a throwback screen against Mississippi State around midfield.
Yeah.
Didn't work. They tried something similar again. This time it was DJ Williams. Earlier they had run a pitch to DJ Williams with a bunch formation to that side. and he gained a lot of yards. And they did it again. This time he threw the ball back to Jaden, went over his head. We thought Jaden made a really smart play by picking the ball up and just like throwing it down the field, but apparently that's still grounding. I don't know. That was a weird call, but
I felt vindicated because I said, "Isn't that grounding?" And then there was like, I think it might have been you and like Brian Peterson, our other colleague. They were like, "No, that's not grounding." And then all of a sudden, the ref throws a flag and calls grounding. I'm like, yes, vindicated.
So. Look, the thing about trick plays is when they work, everybody loves them. When they don't, everybody thinks the coach is stupid. You know, I agree with AZ Catch-On. I didn't think that those were necessary given how well the team was moving the ball. But we also know this about Jedd Fisch. Like, he's big into, like, sequences of plays, right? Like, the T-Mac touchdown against NAU was set up by a previous play, a slot fade, right, to Jacob Cowing. And then, well, that wasn't, I don't know if Jedd Fisch set that up or Jaden DeLora and T-Mac set that up, but it was set up by a sequence of plays, right? You show them a certain look, show them the exact same look again later, and do something different off of it. So I understand the concept of it. I just didn't feel like in either of those cases that they needed to do it because things were going well.
All right, Lev, you got any questions?
Yeah, this one came from John Viator. I'm so sorry, John. I don't know how to pronounce your last name.
Is it Vader?
Is it Vader? It's Vietor.
Okay, never mind.
So it could be Vader. Anyway, very again, one of our better followers out there. Asked a lot of intelligent questions. He asks, has Dorian Singer become a cautionary tale on the dangers to your draft status if you take the NIL carrot? USC seems to have purchased a competitor and buried him. Any chance Singer transfers back to Arizona? And then he, of course, sent us Dorian's stats so far. In 3 games, he has a total of 8 catches for 119 yards and 2 touchdowns. Obviously, he's not going to transfer back to Arizona. He was much more productive here. I would say in this particular case, like, yes and no. Of course, he's not getting as much production so far in kind of a loaded USC offense, but I think part of that is they haven't really had to do anything in the second halves of these games. They haven't been in a close game thus far. I mean, the opener, I think, was the closest game of the season to date. So I think that's going to bring your numbers down. I don't think that the scouts are going to ding him, really. They've seen what he can do. But it is a good sort of point overall. Like, if you're going to make that move, you should make sure that you are going someplace where you're going to play.
Yeah.
You know, and I think playing time is often the driver for those. I think in the situation of the 3 guys who went from here to USC, it's a little different. You know, 2 of the 3 of them are from the Southern California, talking about Keon Bars and Christian Roland Wallace, and they wanted to play in LA.
They always wanted to play at USC.
Yeah. I mean, if you've ever been to USC or seen USC at its peak, you'd want to play for USC too. Yeah. So I get it. Dorian, you know, I think that one, he wasn't really heavily recruited out of high school. You know, he had a Texas opportunity, but then the coaching staff got fired and he started out as a walk-on. So this was a chance for him to kind of be re-recruited. Yeah. You know, go to a quote-unquote big-time school. I think his draft stock will be just fine.
Remember, Caleb Williams said at Pac-12 Media Day when Dorian Singer went off against the Trojans in Tucson, Caleb looked at an assistant coach and said, after the season, are we going to get him? I was so dumbfounded when Caleb Williams said that. I'm like, there's no way this guy's admitting to tampering right here in a public
I don't think
forum.
It's tampering if Caleb Williams himself reaches out to Dorian, right? Like, be like, hey, man, if you're thinking about transferring, wouldn't mind having you around here. Have we that play he made, the one where Caleb Williams was like running out of bounds and threw that rope?
That was the Dorian. That
was the Dorian.
Yeah,
It was like the most ridiculous pass I've ever seen. Here's one for you, Justin. This one comes from, and only you can answer it, I think, maybe. Senor Huevito asks, if I can push the right buttons here. What's more annoying, 100,000 vuvuzelas or 50,000 cowbells? I wore out my mute button on Saturday. You can certainly speak to what it's like to be in the midst of the cowbells. I don't know if you've been around the vuvuzelas in person. We remember those from like past World Cups and so forth. But
I watched the World Cup on mute because of that. The vuvuzelas, I couldn't do it. It sounded like a million bees inside the stadium. It just was not a pleasant sound. The cowbells, I will say, you got accustomed to it, but at first it was very annoying. And there was 1 hour until kickoff. And from 2 hours to 90 minutes to 1 hour to 30 minutes, they always would say like 90 minutes till kickoff, 1 hour till kickoff. And as it gets closer, the more the cowbells you start to hear it. There was 1 hour until kickoff, and it was already obnoxious. The student section was full. A lot of people were trickling into the stadium, and I had it. And I went up to the lady in the press box who was helping Mississippi State serve food. And I'm like, do you guys have like earplugs or anything? And she said, no, sweetheart, you gotta experience it. You really gotta experience it. So suck it up. She told me to get back out there and experience it. And it was annoying as hell, I will say. But you got used to it. However, it did take several hours for me to kind of get used to the non-cowbell sounds. Because when you're in it for 3-4 hours, it's almost like going to a super loud concert and then trying to settle afterwards. I've never been inside of a stadium with vuvuzelas, so I can't really say. But
I will say they were very disciplined. Like they know exactly when to stop with the cowbells, right? Like they know how to not draw a penalty in those situations. Here's a question from Pac-12 commenter that I'm planning to ask Jed Fish if we're able to today. What does Fish think of Coach Prime appropriating his slogan?
It's personal.
It's personal.
I was going to keep that for Colorado Week. Is that fair to ask him now?
I don't know. We'll see how the press conference goes, but definitely an interesting one. I know that Fish is not going to give any bulletin board material whatsoever to Deion now or later, because as we know, Deion keeps receipts. All right, here's one from Sean Coughlin. Why doesn't DJ Williams have a bigger role in the UA offense?
I think, I hate to say this to him, or say this about him, but the bits that we've seen of DJ Williams in comparison to the others, a little bit more one-dimensional. I would say he's a very powerful running back. He's got some burst to him, I will say. Like, he's a really good running back. But when you look at Jonah Coleman and Michael Wiley and even Rayshawn Luke, these guys can be utilized as pass catchers, as wide receivers. You don't really get that with DJ Williams. And so that's why I think in Jed Fish's offense, you need these running backs to do a little bit of everything. We've seen Michael Wiley and Jonah Coleman almost serve as a security blanket for Jaden Delora at times. DJ Williams isn't really those guys. So that's my answer to that.
Yeah, also, there's just a lot of mouths to feed, man.
Yeah, it's true.
You know, I mean, they have 4 legit running backs. If you throw Speedy in there, and he's looked good when he's gotten the ball. I mean, I feel like every time he gets the ball, it's like, man, he's like one tackle away from like taking it to the house.
Yeah.
And Michael Wiley is really good, all around, smooth, smart, reliable, productive, gets a lot of yards after contact. You know, everyone knows I'm a big fan of Jonah Coleman. I think that's part of it too. It's like if you play DJ Williams more, then you're playing those other guys less. So that's a hard one to solve.
All right, got a whole list of questions here.
Yeah.
This one from Brad Malone. Will a Pac-12 team play in the CFP this year? You would think, because the Pac-12 is so loaded this year, 8 teams ranked in the AP Top 25. That's never happened before. You got a couple in the top 10. You got others that are knocking right on the door. I just think eventually conference play is going to get into the thick of it, and these teams are just going to beat up on each other. You're going to have just a constant cycle of teams beating each other, and it's kind of like the crab in the barrel mindset, like where one rises, you're going to have one crab pull him back in the barrel. It's going to be just like that with the Pac-12. You're going to think USC and Washington are ascending and they're going to be the top teams in the conference, but then eventually they're going to trip up. I feel like that's going to be the Pac-12 this year.
I'm going to say yes, that one of the Pac-12 teams is going to make it, because that would be the perfect ending to Pac-12 football. as we know it. I'll cite a few factors. I mean, one, as you mentioned, a lot of really good teams. Okay. Number two, like you're looking around the country, like the SEC is kind of down this year. I mean, I think it's pretty unlikely that we're going to get like 2 SEC teams in there. Could we get 2 Big Ten teams? Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, they all play each other, you know? So like Penn State can't get swept by those two as has been the case in recent years in order to advance. You know, there's still a lot of unknowns, I think, across the college football landscape. But what you need to do if you're Washington or USC or Utah or Oregon State, Washington State, Colorado, these are all the ranked teams. You got to get through the whole thing with 1 loss.
Yeah.
If you can get through the regular season and win that Pac-12 championship game with 1 loss on your resume, I think you're going to make it. And I think somebody will. And I think right now, if I were a betting man, Washington and USC would be the 2 at the top of my list.
This next one comes from Javelina Enthusiast. T-Mac's one-hander is an interception against any decent defense, right? There were 3 UTEP guys right there. Really good point. And that's why I asked you, Michael Lev, I texted you yesterday, what percentage of Jayden de Laura's interceptions do you think are intended to T-Mac? Because when you have a guy who makes so many plays like that, you're like, screw it. I'm going to risk it because you know what? If there's anyone who's going to come down with an insane catch, it's going to be this guy. I honestly, that's a good question.
Yeah, we talk about, you know, throwing a ball that only a receiver can catch. I think only T-Mac could have caught that ball in that situation. A bit of a risky throw, maybe the riskiest throw that Jayden made the entire night. I thought it was just an amazing play because of the fact that there were two defenders around him. It was up the seam, you know, it was in traffic. What did you make of Jed's reaction to it? He was just sort of like,
yawn.
He was like, whatever. I've seen it. It was fine.
It's only number 4 in SportsCenter's top 10 plays. But yeah, I've seen it every single day. And we've seen it multiple times in training camp and spring ball.
But that good in that situation, and we've seen a lot of them, right? I don't know. That one, to me, that one stood out. Yeah. I thought it was truly exceptional. And hey, it's a credit to him. If that's routine for him, which kind of is, that just shows how talented T-Mac is. I mean, he is, to me, he's a future first rounder.
100%. And he's a very gifted person. Just anything he comes across, he excels at it.
He has a good spirit about him, doesn't he?
Yes.
Do you think, like, you remember Drake London, of course?
Yeah. Yeah.
You think he's on that level?
Poor Jaden Young. I just think about they just kind of picked on Jaden Young a couple years ago.
Do you think he could get to that level?
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, just
body type wise, I think about Drake London and I think about Mike Evans. I think both of those guys were top 10 picks.
They were.
I don't know if T-Mac's going to be a top 10 pick, but I think he's going to be a first rounder.
All right, this one, we got a couple from Loudon Montoya, or I think Loudon. Other than Colorado and UCLA, what ranked team do you see Arizona having the best chance of upsetting? Oregon State.
Yeah, Oregon State. That game's here. Yeah. That's a good one.
Maybe Washington State on the road, but that's, again, can you trust Jayden de Laura against his former team in Pullman? That's what it all comes down to. We're going to see a lot over the next
I mean, if you get the Jayden that we just saw, I'd say they have a good chance. Washington State absolutely annihilated Colorado State in their opener, and then Colorado State almost beat Colorado. So if you use the transitive property, Washington State might be really good. Yep. I would say Oregon State's probably the one because it's here. Utah, Utah's interesting. They're doing a lot of Utah things. They're just kind of steadily moving along, and they're doing it all without Cam Rising and Brant Kuithe, right? Their star quarterback and their star tight end. Neither one of those guys has played it down yet. So what is that team going to be like by the time they come here? I mean, are they going to be better than they are now?
Yeah. I would say Utah's kind of like the Apollo Ono of the Pac-12. Apollo Ono, the speed skater, won Olympic medals. He would always stay in the back and just allow others to mess up, have the crash, and then he would go right by him. That's exactly what Utah does every single year. They are the Apollo Ono of the Pac-12.
Can I circle back real quick to what you were asking about, that question about interceptions thrown to T-Mac or whatnot?
Sure.
So PFF, they do sort of credit interceptions to receivers, like passes intended for the receiver that get intercepted. So there's been 18 picks thrown by JDL over the last 2 seasons. The leader on the team as far as the intended target is Jacob Cowing.
Wow.
7 out of 18.
Okay.
So most of the time he's trying to force the ball to Cowing
Yeah.
when an interception happens.
And is ball just getting flipped up? We've seen some picks that aren't Jaden Delores' fault.
No, but some are.
Yeah.
Some are. It's just, he didn't do it this game, but he, in the past, tried to do too much. And when he does that, sometimes he gets in trouble.
Another one from Mr. Montoya. If Arizona continues to struggle generating pressure without having to manufacture it, would you be opposed to using Flo as the go get the quarterback guy while showing a 3 safety look with Maldonado, Taylor or Smith, and Dalton Johnson?
Good question. Good idea. You have talked about Flo kind of serving in that Micah Parsons type of role.
Absolutely.
I don't know if you watched any of the Cowboys-Jets game yesterday. Holy cow. Micah Parsons is just an absolute wrecking ball. I mean, He is unblockable. I'm not saying Justin Flo could be that, but if he could be a poor man's version of that, I think it's worth trying. I described their pass rush in that game as sporadic. And they only rush 4 though most of the time. Like Johnny is just not blitzing that much. He did blitz Dalton Johnson a couple times, and he got 2 pressures in the game, so that's something to look out for. But he's more of a rush 4 and play zone behind it, keep the ball in front of you, come up, make the tackle. But I agree. I think that's a great point. I think that Justin Flo could be utilized in that manner.
And I think the defensive line, I think we'll see them evolve over the season. And who knows, maybe Taylor Upshaw, Tai Uyagalele, who had a very impressive swim move against Mississippi State and got some pressure in there. I think these guys will eventually start making some plays. Also, brought up Gunnar Maldonado. I think we should give him a little tip of the cap for what he did. Considering the first 2 games, missed tackles, missed assignments against NEU.
Got ejected.
Got a touchdown scored on him against Mississippi State. I mean, it was not the best 2 weeks for Gunnar Maldonado. And I thought he rallied back and had a really good game against Utah.
I thought it was really interesting what he said after the game about himself, that he sometimes tries to do too much.
Yeah.
He kind of compared himself to Jaden, but as a defender. And I think that's kind of been Flo's problem in the past too.
Yeah.
Trying to do too much. It's like, you guys are talented enough to be here, take to the coaching, execute your assignment, do your job, and things will be just fine.
Another one from Mr. Montoya. He's got a third one. After the season, what position group are you most concerned about?
After the season?
Yeah. The portal adds a whole nother dimension to this, so it's like, oh man, who's going to leave? Who's going to stay?
Yeah, I would say maybe wide receiver. No, I don't even want to say wide receiver. T-Max should be back.
Montana Lamonius Craig could come back.
The quarterback situation will be interesting if Jaden doesn't come back, because then it's a wide open competition. Is Jed going to be willing to just say, hey, the young guys are going to battle it out, or does he go into the portal? Maybe bring in a veteran, like a bridge player. I think that's an interesting one. Defensive line composition will change because a lot of those guys they brought in don't have another year of eligibility. So are they going to just hand things over to the young guys, or are they going to again go in the portal and maybe bring in some veterans? But those are a couple that spring to mind.
Kind of related to a previous question, if Arizona makes bowl eligibility, where will the wins come from?
And who asked that one?
That's from Bear Down, Go Dubs.
Okay,
so it looks like an Arizona
they are
Warrior
2-1 heading into Pac-12 play. They need to win 4 games the rest of the way. I think you absolutely,
Stanford,
positively have to win Stanford and ASU. Okay, similar to Cal last year. They ended up 5-7 and they lost that game against Cal that they probably should have won. And that cost them a bowl berth. So you have to win those. So then in that middle 7 against those ranked teams, you only have to find 2 wins in that group. I think we've identified some of them. UCLA at home, I think, is a possibility at least. They haven't really been tested yet. Oregon State at home. Maybe Washington State on the road. That's always a place that they don't play very well. Who knows what kind of shape Colorado's going to be in? But the outlook for that game has changed quite a bit. That I mean, they've got the scene there, the atmosphere, the environment, the celebrities. Like,
they really needed to win that game, by the way.
Oh, they did. Yeah,
because
a lot of the shine would have come off if they didn't, and they did find a way.
I will say this. Oregon State is going to be a really tough game at home still. They're really good. And
they're so sound. They just don't make mistakes. They don't turn the ball over. They're good on the lines. They've got DJ Younglele, Tai's cousin, playing really well.
We're going to have a Uiagalelei, sacking a Uiagalelei potentially.
Younglele squared.
That's awesome.
I got one here from Catbacker.
Okay.
Do you think that when coaches determine playing time for players, do they keep in mind which players they can afford to lose in the transfer portal next year? So in other words, he's asking, like, is the transfer portal in any way a consideration when you're doling out playing time? What do you think?
Like regarding, like if
I don't, let's just hypothetically, okay? Let's just say
Sure.
Speedy Luke, okay?
Okay.
Super talented 4-star player, isn't playing that much. Is it anywhere in the back of the coach's minds, hey, we better play this kid or we run the risk of losing him?
I mean, you got to do what works best for you. And then also you have to think, you get a running back every single recruiting class. You feel pretty good about Brandon Johnson and his potential, even if Speedy Luke goes. But Speedy's a really good player. And he's a little bit undersized, yeah, but I don't think you really have to have that mindset if you're college coaches, because then I don't know, what does that send to Michael Wiley, where you're like, okay, if it feels like you're forcing Speedy Luke in the game more, but this is my last season at Arizona, I need to get a lot of the shine. So I don't know, it puts coaches in a really tough spot. So I don't know.
Related question. This is also from AZ Cat John. Seems like using Speedy like Tyreek Hill would open things up even more.
Absolutely.
Have him in motion for at least 20 snaps. So what AZ Cat John is referring to is Mike McDaniel, the coach at Miami for the Miami Dolphins. He's used Tyreek in motion a ton this year. And sometimes like Tyreek is running full speed, like right before the snap.
Yeah.
And he's already the fastest player in the league. So that creates all kinds of problems. I think it's a great idea. In that game last night, by the way, I don't know if you watched any of the Dolphins. Brendan Schooler, who was here for about 5 minutes, Brendan Schooler transferred to Arizona to play with his brother Colin. Then the pandemic hit. He never played a down in an Arizona uniform. But they did something with him that I have never seen before that I think other teams are going to adopt. They ran him in motion on field goal block. So he came running in from the side and got like a running start, and he blocked a field goal, and then they missed one later. So it'll be interesting to see if coaches are always copycats. Are they going to look at something like that and be like, hey, who's our like most athletic special teams guy that we could utilize in this manner? I think the tricky part is you have to time the snap perfectly.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're running in and then you're stopping, and it doesn't work quite as well. But that was very cool to see that, and I think it's a great idea from AZ Cat John to utilize Speedy on the field, even if you're not going to throw to him, motion him out, loosen up the defense. Maybe it springs a tight end up the middle or a run by another running back in the middle of the field between the numbers.
Well, and then eventually you establish a reputation for Speedy as a player who's kind of like that. And one thing I noticed about Tyreek Hill is that they change up the speeds with how they motion him. Sometimes he's hauling ass running across the field, and they allowed him to run all the way through. But then there's sometimes where it looks like he's just hauling through, and then he'll stop halfway through, and then we'll go out into a flat. And he's so fast that when he gets out into the flat, he's wide open because the DBs they're thinking that he's going to go all the way to the other side of the field, so they keep running and motioning. I think if you could do something like that with Speedy Luke, it could really open things up. Really.
Yeah, it's one of those things, too, where it just gives the other team another thing that they have to prepare for.
And you want the defense to always be thinking.
Yep. Yeah, I think good. It's a good call. I like it. It's a good way to utilize him.
All right, any more questions?
No.
All
I think
good?
that's all we got today.
I'm all out. Okay, that'll do it for this episode of the Wildcast. Please be sure to follow all of our coverage on Arizona football on Tucson.com and the Wildcast app.